and are either considering nuclear power or have already initiated nuclear infrastructure program. While construction of nuclear power plant is under the way in Egypt, the emergency of nuclear newcomer in Cairo, in Africa, presents both opportunities and challenges. We unpack these opportunities and the challenges with a global nuclear security gym, which is now we are going to have our panelist Ali ALKIS. He is a nuclear security expert currently pursuing his PhD in Turkey. He served as a junior associate fellow at NATO Defense Colleague Research Division and contributed to defense policy and strategic studies. He is an emerging nuclear security leader with the Nuclear Threat Initiative and wins ambassador to Turkey. He focuses on nuclear security, non-proliferation, and countering nuclear terrorism. Ali is also involved with the Harvard Ukraine Nuclear Security Working Group and advocate for diversity in nuclear policy through the Gender Champion Initiative. Previously, Ali served as a nuclear scholar in UK Nuclear Security Culture Programme, implanted by King College London, where he honed his expertise in nuclear security culture and policy. His insight into Turkish nuclear and foreign policies are widely recognized, and his thought as a leadership is increasingly committed to raising public awareness on nuclear security matter. Ali actively engaged with a broader community through his social media platform. His work continues to make an impact on both national and international nuclear security policy decisions. So, thank you, Ali, for being with us. Kindly, the floor is for you now for a brief introduction about our webinar, and then we are going to open the floor for our attendees.
Thank you so much, Eba, for the kind introduction. And thank you for the audience for showing up at Friday afternoon. It requires a lot to join a webinar at Friday afternoon. Hopefully it will worth your time, and I will try to do my best to answer the questions you might have after the brief introduction of the topic and nuclear security. Today, I will try to cover what is happening in Africa and what is happening in international nuclear security regime in general, because there is a high activity here, but the problem is that we are not ready to address all problems in nuclear security or in all needs that the nuclear can offer to Africa. So I will start with a general outlook of the situation in Africa. Unfortunately, there is a significant energy crisis in Africa, with 57% of the sub-Saharan Africa lacks access to electricity. This hampers development and quality of life. As you can imagine, we all need electricity for our daily lives, and nuclear is one of the solutions to this, but it is also obvious that Africa would really benefit from this. In this regard, nuclear energy is a promising solution, not only to Africa, but also to all countries, including my country, Turkey, which has inaugurated nuclear power plant recently, and the nuclear power plant will be operational later this year. Why nuclear energy is a promising solution? Because it is low carbon and reliable resource, especially as compared to fossil fuel reserves are projected to be depleted by 2030. Some of them are not even cheap as we have expect them to be. However, nuclear security is also important here. We need to prevent thefts, misuse of nuclear materials while we are making use of nuclear technology. Africa's commitment to non-proliferation through Treaty of Palindaba, NPT, and African Commissions on Nuclear Energy, AFCON, is really important here to prepare Africa for nuclear technology. Of course, the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, the IAEA, plays a vital role in supporting Africa's safe and secure nuclear development. When we look at the operational facilities currently in Africa, we only see South Africa, because South Africa is the only African nation with operational nuclear power plants right now. The Coburg nuclear power plant station near Cape Town has 2 reactors with combined capacity of 1900 megawatts, providing almost 5% of South Africa's electricity needs. Coburg's reactors have been operational since the 80s, and they have been their license have been extended in 2010 with a review pending since 2022. Unfortunately, no other African countries currently operate nuclear power plants, though there are some research reactors for different reasons, like South Africa's Safar 1, but these needs to be further developed. But when we look at the further implication, we see that the continent aims for a nuclear capacity of 15 gigawatts by 2035 to address energy shortages and support industrialization in the continent. And the future plans include some new projects that we have already heard about, but one of them is South Africa plans to add 2,500 megawatts of nuclear capacity through SMRs, which might be the game changer if they are operational, which we need to discuss. And with the first unit expected to be operational by 2035, the timeline is changing every day, so it is hard to pinpoint an exact date. And considering that the lack of SMRs with licensing, these dates might be even further delayed. The project secured 9 billion South African rand, which is around 500 million USD in financing. This is a good start, but let's be optimistic about the future and let's hope that it will be sustained. On the other hand, we know that Egypt's Eldaba project, the Eldaba nuclear power plant, is 30% completed, and it is on schedule right now, at least for now, to be connected to the grid. It will mark a significant step forward to nuclear energy adoption in the continent. And on the other hand, when we look at Ghana is advancing its nuclear capabilities by hosting Africa's first new-scale energy exploration center for SMR training and partnering with China's CNNC for the HPR 1000 project, which is quite important, and diversification of the suppliers is also another important issue. And when we look at the further details, we see that Rwanda is investing in nuclear education by sending students to Russian universities because they are cooperating closely with Rosatom, and they are partnering with nano-nuclear energy and dual fluid energy. Other countries like Morocco, Kenya, Nigeria, and Ethiopia are engaging with IAEA to explore more programs, training programs, workshops to train their human resources so that they will have a better understanding of the needs and capability to have nuclear technology. Approximately 1/3 of the 30 countries globally considering nuclear powers are in Africa. So there is a high interest in SMRs in Africa, and these are focusing on SMRs and regional grid integration via the West African Power Pool, which is an important project as well, because considering the financing cost, it is important to have these options to go regional rather than doing national, which requires almost some certain amounts of the national budgets. As I mentioned, Africa's target of 15 gigawatts by 2035 was endorsed at the COP29 with the declaration to triple nuclear energy by 2050. It shows that there is a political interest as well, and developing nuclear infrastructure usually takes more time, but the average here we can say 10 to 15 years, and requires at least 100 years of commitment to safety and security if we are considering a traditional nuclear power plant. And when we look at the nuclear energy side of the advancement, we see that IAEA-led international nuclear security regime offers Africa significant opportunities. And as far as I know, there have been so many close cooperation with the division that oversees African nuclear investment. There has been so many training programs and workshops and in the region and in Vienna and in other parts of the world as well. There are technical assistance. The IAEA milestones approach helps countries to assess readiness for nuclear power, covering legal framework, safety, and security. There has been some missions to Kenya and Uganda in November 2024. These missions were aimed to support the nuclear legal frameworks. It is an important aspect because even before you start investing in nuclear technology, it is important to have a competent regulatory authority and robust legal infrastructure nationally and hopefully regionally and in the continent. There have been human resource development actions, initiatives like African Regional Cooperative Agreement and Nuclear Energy Management Schools. These initiatives train skilled workforces. The 2022 NEM school in South Africa trained 41 participants from 14 African countries. The numbers might sound small, but considering that these are repetitive courses and these are investment in the future, we cannot just assume the numbers are quite low. So on the opposite, these numbers means that there is a political support from the governments to go further. There is also regional cooperation. The IEA promotes collaboration such as through the West African Power Pool, which focuses on regional grid and enabling resource and expertise sharing, which is an important part because every region has their own unique needs and there is no one size fits all solution. So if Africa wants nuclear energy, they need to develop their own frameworks so that they can benefit as a whole. And there are also access to standards. African nations can adopt IAEA's global best practices and ensure rigorous safety and security frameworks. Of course, these need to be tailored according to the individual or regional needs. And considering with half of the Africa's population projected to be under 25 by 2050, training young scientists is critical for sectors like energy and healthcare, especially nuclear technology, because it takes time and there is a high level commitment into nuclear. However, we need to also acknowledge the challenges because even though nuclear technology offers some benefits, there are also some challenges. So first of all, it is financing. High cost of nuclear infrastructure, including waste management and decommissioning, require innovative financing mechanisms that many countries are struggling to provide. And there is also grid technical issues like grid capacity. Most African countries lack sufficient grid infrastructure. For example, one country's 2400 megawatt grid is too small for a large nuclear power plant. Also, we need to discuss the social impacts of nuclear energy, concerns about nuclear accidents like Fukushima in 2021 or like Chernobyl in 1968, 86, and cost can delay programs. So these are all the considerations that we need to consider all these problems, and we need an effective stakeholder engagement, which is essential. Actually, this week there was a conference at the IAEA about stakeholder engagement, and I have seen so many African speakers going to the stage and exploring the possibilities of what Africa's nuclear technology look like. And there is also a legal framework issue. Developing comprehensive laws aligned with international standards is a complex issue. For example, there has been some issues, but Kenya and Uganda has been refining their nuclear laws with the IAEA support. There is a support available there, but it requires a framework to be aligned with the investment programs. And I would you like to connect it to the nuclear security regime that if we have all these nuclear technology and nuclear infrastructure, we need to also sustain the nuclear security regime, and maintaining nuclear security regime and continuous resources, training and commitment, challenging for resources of the nations that has already limited budgets. So we need to also think this behind of our minds. All of these needs to be considered within the broader framework. Of course, there are other parts, but as my expertise lies with nuclear security, I would like to focus on this. Just to be clear and to be on the same page, what nuclear security means? It means the protection of nuclear materials and facilities against unauthorized access or unauthorized actions. Of course, there is an official IAEA definition, which is longer, and I don't think we need official definitions here, but as long as we know that nuclear security means that we need to protect the facilities and materials from unauthorized actions, like anyone from the outside, it might be helpful to understand what the term refers to. And the aim is clear. The nuclear security aims to prevent theft, sabotage, and unauthorized access. There is also insider threats. You might consider why unauthorized access. So if we have insiders, is it unauthorized access? Yes. If a person is doing something against his or her authorization, it is still unauthorized access. So we can also consider insider threats within an integral part of nuclear security. Unfortunately, there is no nuclear security standards. It's based on guidelines, and in this regard, IAEA has an indispensable role. It provides global support and technical guidance to the countries with their request from the relevant authorities to IAEA. Otherwise, IAEA has a limited mandate in terms of nuclear security. Considering Africa's needs, we need to combine the need and the security as well as the non-proliferation norms into all these needs, and we need to approach the issue considering all possible aspects. To finish my presentation and opening remarks, to give more space to questions, it is Africa is ready for nuclear technology because there is also a political need, political willingness, and there is also an obvious need. There are also climate goals, which is aligning with the nuclear technology. In this regard, I believe IAEA's role in technical assistance and standards will be helpful to accelerate the process for African countries. However, as I said, there are issues that needs to be addressed before we can talk about the advancement of nuclear technology in terms of energy production in Africa, because it needs financing, it needs technical capability, it needs grids, and societal acceptance. However, there is also one important part I need to reiterate, that in the continent, there have been further attempts to stick with the non-proliferation and security norms. And in this regard, the Treaty of Pelindaba, even though it is a non-nuclear weapon-free zone agreement, it has some articles which supports the global nuclear security regime, like prohibiting attacks to nuclear facilities, which is an important example and will be used for other regions, hopefully, in the future. This will be all my initial talks, and if you have any other questions, I will be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ali, for this presentation, and I want to extend my sincere gratitude for your expansion contribution and informative presentation. Now we are going to open the floor to any of our attendees to ask a question. But first, let me start with myself. Ali,
Yeah.
could you please tell me what are the steps should be processed to strengthen nuclear security, especially in Africa countries?
Okay, it's a great question to start with the discussion. I have focused on nuclear technology and nuclear power plants generally, but when we talk about nuclear security, it also includes radioactive materials. Even though in Africa there are not many countries with nuclear power plants, there are many countries who uses nuclear radioactive materials for health, for agriculture, and for industry. So securing those things are important, and it starts with the legal implementation. So first we need a legal framework that explains every step which every stakeholder should follow. It starts with the regulator, then it goes to the enforcers, and it goes to the public. So as long as we have this cascade effect, which gives roles and distributes roles and responsibilities, then we can expand our application of nuclear security in broader sense. And hopefully, when we have more nuclear facilities, like research reactors or nuclear power plants in Africa, there will be already a robust nuclear security regime in the continent so that we can expand it in a secure way. Just to be clear, sometimes it is confusing. When we say nuclear materials, it only applies to uranium, plutonium, and thorium. Other elements are radioactive materials like cobalt or americium or cesium. These are also within the framework of nuclear security, and they are widely available in hospitals, in different parts of industry, and in agriculture. So it starts with the legal framework and it cascades to the people.
Thank you, Ali, for your response. Now we are going to have another question from Osman from South Africa. Osman wanted to ask you, Ali, what measures related to nuclear security risk and proposed mitigation strategy to be considered, especially for the newcomers before installation of nuclear power plant in Africa?
That's a great question. I'm also from a nuclear newcomer country. I'm from Turkey, and we have just inaugurated our first nuclear power plant. So we actually share so many things in common. So I will start with our lessons learned from our experience. Before you have nuclear power plants, it is also similar to your question. You need to understand what is the problem, and you need to understand your unique threat or risk profile. For example, in many countries, I don't see that there is a risk to nuclear power plants, because if you consider a terrorist organization who might try to attack nuclear power plants, you should also consider that are they capable of such actions, because nuclear power plants are highly protected, right? So considering all capability and intent, also we should, I think someone is lost there. Can you mute them? Because I think you are also a host. Oh. Sorry, back to the question. Before anything else, before everything is ready for nuclear power plant, you need your legal framework and you need your expertise, human resources ready to implement those rules. At this point, IAEA comes to the forefront of this collaboration. You need to have a higher level of interaction with the IAEA so that you know the best practices and you can tailor the lessons learned from other countries into your needs. I hope it covers the question.
There is one more question from Kenya. Alfred wanted to ask you, does Kenya meet the necessary requirement to build a nuclear power plant?
Alfred, I will be honest with you. I didn't do much research specifically on Kenya, but building a nuclear power plant has, from security perspective, there are some certain requirements. So before even the first nail is on the ground, you need to assess your threat profile. And there is a document called Design Basis Threat. It provides all the information about the possible risks and capabilities of the threats to your nuclear power plant or your nuclear facilities. It is also valid for research reactors. So when you consider this DBT, Design Basis Threat document, it will give you the detailed information. It is not important only that there is a possible threat out there. As long as you have capability to respond to that threat or address to that threat, you have enough capability to build a nuclear power plant. But as I said, I didn't do a research on country-specific context, but I'm happy to connect with you if you have any further questions or if you can provide me further information about Kenya so that I can, if you have something specific about Kenya, if you think a special issue makes a difference, we can discuss it further on.
Okay, one more question, Ali, from Nisi. Given the current geopolitical landscape, what, in your opinion, are the implications of different nuclear vendors looking to export their technologies into Africa, and what it means for a global nuclear security regime?
That's another great question. And there are two sides of it. One side is the positive side, which is good for energy security because we don't want a country to be dependent on energy to be only one specific supplier. We don't need to be talking a specific country, but let's give an example from country X. If 5 or 10 countries from Africa is dependent on country X for nuclear technology, if things go wrong, we will have a problem. So we don't want that. As long as there are different vendors, let's say country X, Y, Z, providing nuclear technology to African countries, it is diversifying the suppliers, which is the good thing, and which is in theory the optimal thing from the perspective of energy security. But when we look at from the suppliers' point of view, it is evident that if a supplier, or a vendor tries to supply its technology in a competitive manner, relatively competitive to others, and it goes to specific region or specific countries, then there should be a question. Why this supplier wants my country and wants to supply this nuclear technology to me in this way? Because nuclear technology, as I mentioned in the beginning, if you are talking about a nuclear power plant, a traditional nuclear power plant, it almost requires 100 years of commitment. The construction, the operation, the decommissioning. So you are becoming dependent on one country. Of course, there will be some political implications for it. So in this regard, my suggestion, my humble suggestion for any country who thinks nuclear technology or who are among the candidates of being nuclear newcomer, it would be best to get the best deal out of the competition, and it is always best to go for the next supplier if you have already one. I mean, it is even the same when you are doing our own shopping, right? Consider yourself, you are going to a market, you want to the best deal, right? You don't want to spend much money on the same food. You want to have the best food for the best price. You don't want the same food to buy 2 times higher. But you don't want to be also dependent on one market, because otherwise, if that market closes, you will not have any food. So it is a basic human instinct can guide us in this regard. So there are, as I said, political issues related to nuclear. And in this regard, we need to be carefully choosing our vendors, and we should be diversify our vendors if we have more than one project.
Thank you, Ali. Another one question from Burkina Faso from Lanciano. Lanciano is a coordinator of Newcomer for Nuclear Working Group. He is asking, is there any hope for Sahel country to have nuclear power plants? I'm talking about Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, which are under terrorist attack, especially as we know that Niger has completed the first phase of stages prescribed by IEA.
Lansina, the answer is clear. Yes, nuclear power plants can be built anywhere. It goes to the question, okay, you might have terrorist attacks, but there are terrorist attacks in many countries which have nuclear infrastructure.
Yes.
Consider Ukraine. There is an ongoing invasion in Ukraine, and there are nuclear power plants, and they are planning to have more nuclear power plants, even though there is an ongoing war. So it is not about terrorist attacks. It comes to the point that what can your DBT, design-based threat document, can tell you about these terrorists? I mean, do you believe that those terrorists will attack the nuclear facilities? If they attack, do they have capability to harm your nuclear infrastructure, or what is the threat means to you? So when you assess all these things, it is quite possible that you can have nuclear power plants as long as you have confidence in your detection and response mechanisms against any terrorist attacks. And I would like to remind something that nuclear power plants are generally built in castle-like modes, and if there is a possibility of conflict, they are reinforced. So even if there is a threat out there, you have your options. Of course, it will increase the cost, but you have the option to determine the physical protection and other protection mechanisms against those terrorist attacks or possible terrorist attacks, as long as you have political willingness and financial capabilities. This is from a national perspective, but considering from a supplier, the supplier may not be willing to provide the technology in a conflict-prone zone. That's the negative side of it. But it comes to the point that as long as you have capability to provide that, there you can detect and respond in a relative manner to any threats. I don't see any problems with having nuclear power plants in the region that Lansina is referring to.
Okay, thank you, Ali. One more from Adeline Yago from Cameroon. She wanted to thank you, Ali, for the informative presentation, and she asked you, please, in terms of capacity building to support the African nations' interest in nuclear technology, what should be the more relevant action to undertake to be strengthen nuclear security resources accordingly? Thanks, Ali, for Adeline Yago.
Okay, thank you, Adeline, and it's great to see you here and joining us. She's also one of our mentors from Black Sea Women in Nuclear Network, so it's great to see her here. You mean I couldn't follow the question correctly, but if I'm not mistaken, Adeline is asking about the capacity building, like human resources, right?
Yeah, yes. The terms of capacity building to support the African nation in nuclear technology. What are the relevant action to strengthen nuclear security resources?
I mean, the issue is valid for every regions, because there is an upcoming next generation. I don't like to call next generation the now generation, as Elena Sokova calls. Now there is a huge potential in the now generation people, young people, and unfortunately, they there is a lack of interest in governments and at the IAA level to address this problem, because it comes to the money. As long as you don't have financial means, financial resources, you cannot train or educate everyone in this regard. And in Africa context, especially, even if there are potential and even if there is an IAEA support to train more and more people, there is an issue that as there is no uh, advancing nuclear infrastructure, there is a limited interest in the training the future generations, because what will you do with those trained, highly skilled people? They will not stay in Africa because there is no place to offer them jobs. So
Mhm.
these nuclear investment and investment in human resources should go hand in hand, so that those people who have training can have their hands on the jobs where they are needed. In this regard, I only believe that following the IAEA guidelines and IAEA summer schools, winter schools, nuclear security schools, or IAEA conferences and workshops, being visible in these platforms will be the only option that we have for the people. It is also applicable to Turkey and many other countries. As long as there is no advanced nuclear infrastructure, we have limited options, and we have limited positions, and we cannot just train everyone, unfortunately, and we cannot just expect everyone who has training to be employed. So this is a problem, but human resource issue can be solved as long as there is a nuclear infrastructure. So it will be an important training when there is a nuclear infrastructure in your specific country. So you will be the person who they want, but until then, human resources are a little bit dependent on the political atmosphere and the financial investment of the country that you are citizen.
Thank you, Ali. One more question from Shkagdu from Nigeria, and he's also a member of Nuclear Aware Africa. He is stating that so Africa faces obvious financial and economic constraints. How then can African country finance nuclear power program? Must we all achieve economic stability and prosperity first? Thanks.
No, exactly no. You don't need economic prosperity. You don't have time to wait for it. I mean, we have been too late for nuclear technology. I am talking also from my national experience. We have been too late to introduce nuclear technology to our people, our nations, and we cannot wait for economic prosperity to reach us, because maybe the economic prosperity lies with the nuclear technology. Because if we don't have electricity, or if we don't have the sources to progress our nations, how can we achieve the economic prosperity? There is a pathway here that China and Russia, unfortunately, there has been no attempts from the Western suppliers, but China and Russia offers build, own, and operate systems in different capacities. Of course, it comes with different implications, but when you have these suppliers who are ready to provide technology to your country, or and on the condition that you buy the electricity produced in the nuclear facility, I think it is a win-win situation, because normal traditional nuclear power plant is expected to cost $30 billion. It's a huge amount of money, but it can solve so many different problems which access to electricity offers. So in this regard, Chinese or Russian model offers some benefits if you don't have the initial capital, but I am not sure, I cannot recommend that is the solution, because of course, if you have this, if you are providing this technology on build, own, and operate system, of course, there is also some benefits to the supplier, which should be checked with your needs and expectations. So as long as you have a good deal, then you don't need to wait for a economic prosperity, because without nuclear technology, it may not come after all. Heba, you are muted.
Thank you, Ali. Lancino want also to thank you for your answer to his questionnaire. I don't think now there are no more questions in our chat. But kindly let me ask the audience to open their camera to have a group photo for this webinar, and then we continue the questionnaire. Kindly open your camera to have a group photo for this webinar.
Why you didn't turn on your cameras beforehand, huh? Heba, you are muted.
Another one, please.
I think I have one more question from Frederick from Ghana.
Yes.
Eh,
Frederick from Ghana, what mechanisms are in the place for stakeholder engagement and participation in nuclear security decision making?
my answer will be clear. There is no, because when it comes to nuclear security, no one cares about stakeholder engagement. It is a government issue and it is an government or institutional issue. So relevant government agencies come together and takes the decisions to be applied. However, I would prefer that there is a transparent way in a way that doesn't harm the classified information, that they inform public about the security implications and they inform public to be proactive in terms of security arrangements so that they can be integral part of security arrangements around the facilities, because security is not only responsibility of security divisions or the guards at the gate. Security is a societal or cultural responsibility. After all, if something happens to our nuclear facilities or nuclear materials within our countries, it affects us all. So it is our mutual benefit to protect and support the protection of nuclear facilities and material. But so far, as it is a security issue, it is a highly classified issue in many countries, and most of the regulatory authorities does not involve any third parties in decision making. It is only governmental institutions taking the decisions and given to the operators to implement them on the site.
Thank you, Ali. Is there anyone want to ask Ali before we conclude our webinars? Yeah, one more question. Thank you for your presentation. I have question. Is there any guideline on emerging technologies which as a threat to nuclear security? How do they cope up this emerging threat in nuclear security? This question is from IRSA from Pakistan Nuclear Regulatory Authority.
Hi, Irsa, nice to see you here as well. Emerging technologies is a problem for everyone because you can exploit the technology or you can use for the benefit of the humanity. But in most cases, it is the exploitation of the technology for the malintentions. In this regard, nuclear facilities have something in common, that they are mostly manual. So nuclear industry resists digitalization. Most of the nuclear power plants that are operational are monologues. They don't have digital systems. Even if they have digital systems, they don't allow them to be in the critical or vital systems. So it poses a threat, but there is no specific application of, or I haven't seen any specific issues or guidelines, but there are World Institute for Nuclear Security webinars on drones, on AI, and on emerging technologies. Maybe it might be useful to watch them or join those webinars or discussions. But unfortunately, there are not many guidelines available. IAEA has been working on a document. What unfortunately things at IAEA take a lot of time, and any publication will be taken with the decision of all member states. And you can imagine, in this political atmosphere, it is not easy to agree on something, even if it is for the benefit of everyone, or even if it threatens everyone. So we just need to wait until IAEA publishes something, or we can just check out Vin's webinars. There has been some developments with the VCDMP and King's College London. They have been checking, they're specifically looking on some certain issues like the AI and supply chain. So those kind of things might be helpful. And maybe I can also give something for the future reference that I am writing a book chapter with two friends from King's College London, how the terrorist organizations can exploit vulnerabilities in nuclear security regime, like emerging technologies, and how they can leverage these emerging technologies to exploit vulnerabilities in nuclear field. So maybe if you can wait for 6 months or 10 months, even though it's not a guide, you might have a better idea.
Yes, thank you for informing us that you are preparing for this announcement and working, and we will wait for 6 months or 10 months. One more question from Frola, and she is from Argentina. I'd like to ask you for point of view on the new challenges in nuclear security and the small moderator reactor. In your opinion, what do you think will be the most challenging topic to address?
Yes, that's an important topic we didn't cover. Thank you, Fiorella, for asking and reminding us the importance of security for SMRs. SMRs will be game changers if they are operational, but I'm not that optimistic because, there has been always nuclear renaissance in 80s, 50s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. There are always nuclear renaissance, but in the end, we see what happened. So if that nuclear renaissance happens, SMRs will be a key player, but we don't expect SMRs to be operational before 30s, at least 40s. So we have still time for getting prepared. The only issue, there are many issues, but foremost issue with the SMRs is that they are planning to lower the number of people who are available at the site because of the smaller footprint. It might cause problems because these will be digital tools. I mean, after all, SMRs will be a digital reactor. So it brings vulnerabilities, and considering that cybersecurity is getting more and more attention, and there are more vulnerabilities, and considering that there will be less people who can control the reactor, it poses a risk. But on the other hand, there are security by design for SMRs, which is under consideration. Of course, it is not approved or it is not the benefit for the designers because they also need to balance the safety, security, and non-proliferation norms with the financial gains that they will achieve from these SMRs. So it will be really hard to balance all this together. But if they manage to provide security by design, then it will be more beneficial for all of us in terms of security. And also, if I'm not mistaken, some of the SMRs will be designed in a way that they don't need to be fuel refreshed. So their fuel will be inside and it will be transported with the reactor itself. So it decreases the risk of fuel theft or and they will have more reinforced structure. So it will also affect the sabotage and the impact of sabotage on the reactor. So these are really changing issues. Until we have a licensed reactor which is operational, it will be on hypothetical discussion. And I'm not an expert on SMRs. I should do more research on SMRs, but from my limited knowledge, there is a potential for security as well. But the main issue with the SMRs is that it will be important for countries who cannot afford traditional nuclear power plants because SMR might cost $1 or $2 billion rather than $30 billion of capital investment for a traditional nuclear power plant. So it offers benefits for countries or nations with lower capital, initial capital. So I hope in this regard they will balance these financial gains with the security things. But as I said, I am not an expert on SMR, so these are all my limited information. I don't want to speculate about it.
Thank you, Ali. Nessie wanted to thank you for this informative session, and it is always saying that it is always good listening to
Very
you,
see, very see.
Nessie. And also, Isa wanted to thank you for addressing his question. Flora, she is grateful for your response and the valuable information you provided. Okay. Now, anyone wanted to add any questionnaire? Please drop on the chat before we come to our clothing session. Yeah, he's here. Hello, Nessie.
Hi, Ali. Like I said, it's always nice to have you here, and I really appreciate you for finding out time to put this together and to share with the global community. And
Oh, of course, anytime. I am happy to support any initiative that you have, and I'm always happy to share information as long as it is helpful to anyone who respects, who has an interest in nuclear technology. Thank you, Nessie.
thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Okay. Does anyone want to add more questionnaire before we finalize our session? Adeline wanted to thank you, Ali, for your answer. Thank you, Adeline. Nice to meet you again in our
And
webinar.
we thank her for showing up and all others who spared their times on Friday afternoon to join us. It was really great to be here, and I'm always reachable on LinkedIn or Twitter. If you have further questions, please reach out to me, and I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Okay. Now come to our end of our session. Dear distinguished speaker Ali, participant and honored guest, as we conclude today on lighting session on the international nuclear security regime and the unique challenges and opportunities for nuclear newcomer in Africa, we are reminded of significant threat our content is making in the realm of nuclear energy and security. The key talks of our session was the commitment to safety and security, regional cooperation, public engagement, and capacity building. Now we extend our heartfelt gratitude to our estimated speaker Ali for his invaluable insight and to participate and to all participants for this active engagement. Your contributions are instrumental in shaping the future of nuclear security. On the behalf of Nuclear Aware Africa and on the behalf for moderating this session, I would to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you, Ali, and for being with you in this webinar. For further resources and discussion, please keep contribute and thank you once again for your participation. We look forward to continue collaboration in advanced nuclear security across Africa. Now, Ali, all of our attendees wanted to thank you 100 times for your presentations and important topic and informative presentation. And also, Muhammad El Tayyar from Iraq wanted to thank you about the rich information and Adeline. Thank you all of attendance and on the behalf of Nuclear Aware Africa, Ali, we would you to thank you and I would a special thanks to you, Ali, from my side, to being with you in this webinar, and to the leader of capacity building and advocacy, Mustafa Abdel Razak, and to the leader of Nuclear Aware Africa, Ruth. Thank you all attendants and have a good day. Wishing you spend a nice weekend. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.